Welcome back. I'm Rachelle Akuffo. The African Union is meeting in South Africa to discuss the continent's most pressing issues, among them the economy, security challenges, infrastructure, and thousands of fleeing migrants. I spoke to Kathleen Newland from the Migration Policy Institute. She's director of the Migrants, Migration and Development Program. I began by asking her who's bearing the economic brunt of the growing migrant population.
Italy and Greece are the first points of entry to Europe for the overwhelming majority of the migrants. I think last year Italy got 170,000 people coming across the sea. Greece had over 40,000. But most migrants are not intending to stay in those countries. They're intending to make their way north to countries that either have better job prospects or where people have families, friends, some community, or both.
Just how big is this problem?
Well, it's huge, and there's no limit to the numbers, given the fact that more than half of the states in Africa are regarded as fragile states. People have good reason to be looking for safety and to be looking for better prospects. So it's an enormous management problem, and one that ultimately is going to have to involve some kind of conversations between the countries of origin, where that's possible, and the countries in Europe, and the transit countries also. I mean, they're a big part of the equation, and it's a big problem for countries like Libya, like Sudan, like Niger, who are finding their law enforcement capabilities overwhelmed by these flows of people and by the increasing influence of sort of criminal syndicates that are getting into the smuggling business.
How has that grown, along with the problem of the number of migrants growing?
I think the big change that we're seeing in the last couple of years is the professionalization of the smuggling industry. It's no longer a fisherman who's looking to make a few extra dollars by using his boat to take people to Lampedusa. It's much more an organized and a very lucrative business now.
Now let's take a look at some of the costs. First, starting with rescue costs. Obviously, if people are traveling in unsafe vessels across the sea, someone's having to find these people to pick them up, take them to safety. Who's bearing the brunt of all these costs?
Well, it's a very good question. It's a controversy now within Europe and has been throughout this year. Up until December of last year, the Italians were bearing the overwhelming burden of the search and rescue operation, and they reckoned that it was costing them about €9 million a month. And Italy is in the middle of a financial crisis. So in the end, after having their pleas for European assistance pretty much turned down, they said, we just can't do this anymore by ourselves, and cut back their search and rescue operation. The European Union came in with a sea border patrol operation that was less than half the size of the Italian operation. And the result was absolutely predictable: a lot more deaths at sea. The Europeans have responded to that, starting in April, when we had a really horrific incident in which 7 or 8 or even 900 people died. And those EU resources have now been supplemented by national ships, planes, helicopters, which is much more effective.
Tell us a little bit about the realities of the economic impact of these immigrants versus the perception.
Well, such studies as have been done on the fiscal impact of immigrant populations tend to show that they, over time, bring a small fiscal benefit. And of course, that doesn't take into account a lot of more subtle things like how many women who are well qualified from the country has an employer houseworker to help with their child care. And so their productivity goes up tremendously. It's very hard to make that kind of calculation overall. in the beginning, up front, when people have just arrived, they need a lot of support. They need training, they need language training, they maybe need job training, they need housing, and so on. So the upfront costs are pretty high. But over time, given the chance, that is, given the chance to enter the labor market, to get an education, immigrants tend to contribute pretty substantially to the receiving economies.